Hello, welcome to Cannabis Live. I'm Craig Aronoff with the Cannabis Legal Group, sitting in with Barton Morris. We're here to talk about all the changes and things we're seeing in the cannabis industry here in Michigan, as we're excited to have our new Facility Licensing Act come online over the next year. We'll be talking about different topics and different exciting changes that we're seeing on a week-to-week basis here. So you can expect to see Cannabis Live coming to you once a week live. And we'll be trying to keep the topics as hot as we can. Certainly, if you have any questions, we encourage you to engage. We'd love to hear from you. So please like us, share us, ask those questions. So today we're going to be talking about banking and some changes in the law and how the Financial Enforcement Network is handling things. So Bart, why don't you tell us a little bit about some things we've learned recently?
All right, so a lot of people in the cannabis industry and having businesses related to marijuana are very interested in, and certainly understand that banks are unwilling to take their deposits, and it's creating a crazy situation because if all these dispensaries and operators are in the business and they can't take deposits, they can't use credit cards, then it creates an entirely cash economy for marijuana related businesses. And so this is a significant problem as it relates to the development of this entire industry. We're talking about a $7 billion industry right now that is exponentially growing, and it's all in cash or mostly in cash. And so something that needs to be discussed. And first I want to start off with a couple examples. We can be this is an article from the Washington Post about the Marijuana Policy Project. The Marijuana Policy Project is a lobbying group, I guess you would call them, from Washington, D.C. They're responsible for many of the legalization efforts all over the country. In fact, they are partners with like MI Legalize and a couple other groups that are responsible for the ballot initiative, Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, that they're collecting signatures now for in the state of Michigan. And so they had a 22-year-old account with PNC Bank, and 22 years, and PNC recently told them that they were going to shut down their account. Why? Because because they believed, the bank believed that a lot of their money is coming from marijuana-related businesses, which it probably does. And so PNC Bank has a problem with that, and for reasons I'll explain in a second, and so they're shutting their bank account down.
And what's really shocking, of course, is that the MPP has no touching of the cannabis directly. They're not actually in the actual cannabis industry. They're just a lobbying firm that is looking to advocate on behalf of activists that are seeking to provide better laws around the country. So they're in a national perspective and a national position. And of course, in each state, as Barton mentioned, our groups locally, like MI Legalize and Regulate Like Alcohol, are both entrenched with their policies and working together. So the fact that a lobbying group can have it touch them in the banking industry really means we just have to have added caution through the process as we set up these companies and we start to work with operators to really track their cash flow and have their I's dotted and T's crossed.
Another example is my law firm, our law firm, the Cannabis Legal Group. Recently was advised that our bank account would be shut down by Huntington Bank in Michigan. And Huntington Bank, we have been there for over a year, and we have a doing business as like the Cannabis Legal Group. And so they knew that we are related in the cannabis industry space. They didn't have a problem with it. But what I think was going on is that we, because a lot of our clients deal with cash and they come and pay us with cash and then we're making cash deposits, the bank started identifying these cash deposits and did their own investigation. They have to file something called SAR, Suspicious Activity Reports. When they have a significant amount of cash deposits, there's scenarios under which that they have to file these reports and deliver them to the Department of Treasury. And they did their own investigation, probably looked at our website and saw that we represent businesses that Even though we don't touch the plant, we don't have anything to do directly with the cannabis plant, but many of our clients do. And when they made that connection, they did the same thing that they did to NPP and the Marijuana Policy Project and closed our account.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a shocking development, really frustrating because, the fear of the bank, of course, is the idea of money laundering. And, businesses that are in the industry have legitimate expenses. Their legal fees are legitimate expenses. And what happens for the banking side, though, is the regulatory scheme and the requirements, as Bart was describing. They were required to investigate it, and they have to do more in this space than they would in most other industries because the onus is on the bank to actually account for why their banking partners are having these cash deposits and explaining it to FinCEN. So the onus is on the bank to increase its regulatory compliance, and it makes it harder for them and makes their willingness to really engage the space a lot less.
Yeah. So what do we do about it? What can companies like myself, companies like our clients, this entire industry, what are we going to do about it, especially here in Michigan? So, we did, because this come back from the National Cannabis Industry Association Business Summit in California. That was last week. And we did speak about this particular subject quite a bit. And I learned a little bit more about how to deal with it. And there's a couple different things that we can do. First of all, we have to understand that a bank is not going to allow these cash deposits and allow this relationship to continue until they have a solid belief and understanding that there's going to be a regulatory system in place to ensure that there are no funds that are being derived from a black market source. Because if a dispensary, for instance, like a lot of these dispensaries that are in operation right now in Michigan, they're not regulated at all. Like literally anybody could go in there and purchase marijuana. It doesn't even have to be a patient. If a dispensary wanted to sell to somebody that's not a patient, they could, and probably not deal with that much regulation because they're not regulated. So how does a bank know that? They don't. And so when a bank takes all these cash deposits, they don't know whether the money is lawfully obtained or unlawfully obtained. They just know that it's cash. And so I understand they don't want to take that and be subject to a party of money laundering. So when Michigan becomes regulated, and that's going to happen in 2018, where our dispensaries, cultivators, processors, they're going to be highly regulated, meaning that every transaction, every sale, every cash receipt is going to be tracked and from beginning to end. So in that circumstance, like the way it is in Colorado and Washington and Oregon, where there are banking relationships that are beginning to be obtained, that is when Michigan and the companies here that are related to cannabis are going to be able to establish relationships with banks that will be willing to do so. And by the way, not all of them are going to be willing to do so. In fact, in the beginning, very few are going to be willing to do so. But we need that regulation first, which is another great example of why the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act is going to be a significant development for the cannabis industry in Michigan, because not only is it going to create a significant commercial framework, but it's going to allow for that banking relationship to change, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And, we've been saying now for the last several weeks that we've been doing this, how Michigan is kind of an emerging market. We've described it in a few different ways that way. But the reality is that these other markets are far more mature. That's another way to look at it. So California and Colorado have had, in California now nearly 20 years, in Colorado a little under 10, of a commercial market. And with that come the challenges that these operators have had in the banking space, amongst other challenges that they've overcome. And what we've learned is that they've kind of found the way to work through these challenges by either creating either a state bank level or possibly working with credit unions that are going to be involved. And the real long-term key to that is the disclosures and the willingness of the industry to be open and transparent about its involvement in the space. So currently in Michigan, it's as Barton was describing, these dispensaries don't have a license. They might be allowed to exist in the cities, and we read all the time how many have been closed, but they're technically not even technical, they're legally not licensed by the state of Michigan. Next year it's going to be a different ballgame, and with that comes this regulation that will be our friend. The regulation will be the rules of the game. And those people that dot the I's, cross the T's, and follow the rules of the game are going to get the ancillary services that they need in order to operate properly, including the banking.
So another suggestion that I have, that we strongly have, is support industry associations or cannabis business associations that are doing the work in Congress in order to change the views and change federal law as it relates to this particular issue. So specifically, not only the Marijuana Policy Project, that is an association that we should support, but the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is here. They, as you see, they're into advocacy. That's like one of the big reasons and one of the big functions that they endeavor to do. They have lobbying efforts that are significant in Congress in order to provide a voice of the cannabis industry. And they are leading the charge, along with many, many others, in order to get the banking reform that we know is necessary in order to allow for the banking relationships to happen.
Yeah, and certainly that's among other issues that they're going to be pursuing. But banking is right at the top of their list because that is amongst the biggest challenges of all the operators in states that already have the regulatory compliance already. One thing that we got to remember from the congressional side is there's 29 states that have medical marijuana on their books. That means that there's 58 senators and umpteen number of representatives that are representing districts in states where it's already been voted on and approved. So companies and lobbyists like the NCIA, they're now having a voice. They're now talking to the staffers. They're talking to the Cannabis Caucus of Congress, and they're working behind the scenes to help fix these problems. And it's important that advocacy and investment in that advocacy come through. And so, yes, join these organizations, participate, because in the end, what you'll find is you'll have friends in the industry that end up being network partners for purposes of future business together.
One thing that I have learned through that business summit that we went to is that there will be federal oversight and federal intervention into the cannabis industry. It has to happen, and I believe, and many believe it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And so that leads me to the next thing that we can do in the industry in order to promote banking relationships, which is reach out, exactly what Craig talked about. Reach out to our legislators. There are 28, 29 different states, including Michigan, that have some type of medical marijuana or recreational marijuana laws that allow for it. So Michigan, we should be, and in all other states, we should be communicating with our legislatures in order to push this agenda. And one particular bill that I have seen now been reintroduced recently is called the Compassionate Access Research Expansion Respect States' Rights Act, which is, and I have it here, which has been supported, and I think it's been introduced by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Kristen Gillibrand of New York, Rand Paul, a Republican from where is he? Kentucky, right? Yep. And a host of other a host of other legislators.
Yeah, one of the things that's really I think very striking as we continue to immerse ourselves in the industry is the bipartisanship on this topic. It's very bipartisan, meaning there's a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats. So if you were to poll them, this is one of the few things they actually agree on, is these changes. And it's just a matter of getting Congress to move. So this could be some common ground that could help, believe it or not.
So if you see right here, it talks about this particular act talks about how it will introduce federal banking reform with regard to prohibiting banks from closing accounts like they did to mine, and from taking adverse or corrective action against cannabis-related businesses, providing depository institutions that provide financial services protection under federal law from criminal prosecution for money laundering. This bill is significantly important, and the fact that it's been reintroduced, and by the way, in the Senate now it has 17 co-sponsors, bipartisan co-sponsors, and then there's another companion bill in the House that has 31 co-sponsors. That's a significant amount of congressmen that are in support of the cannabis industry reform that is necessary on the federal level. And the banking issue is something that they recognize. They also recognize in this particular act or bill that they recognize the importance of expanded research, so that because it's a Schedule I drug, I think they also call for it to be rescheduled to Schedule II. But in order to be able to expand for the research necessary in order to develop the medical benefits of cannabis, they also it also calls for veterans to be able to treat with cannabis, because the Veterans Administration, being a federal authority, is being left out of the ability to use cannabis as a medical medicine. And veterans, many of whom are suffering from PTSD, are not having the opportunity to use cannabis to treat that particular illness, which is a shame, because I think it's been proven that cannabis is effective at treating PTSD. And we have to, of course, look out for our veterans, some of the most important people in our country as it relates to the freedom of our country and to the sovereignty of our nation. So that's something that obviously everyone should support.
Absolutely, and as we talk about how banking is one of the many challenges that the industry has, and it dovetails into all these other sectors and research and whatnot as well. And to be clear, what we're really talking about is federal investment in research. There's a ton of research, there's a ton of data out there already done by private funding and done by this mature industry that's in other markets. And certainly the idea that it's not a gateway but rather a step down from opiate addiction is something that's becoming more and more commonly known. In fact, I was just in the Free Press the other day discussing how cannabis is going to be something that may help that cause the more it becomes available to our patient market, certainly hopefully to our veteran market as well, and then of course the recreational adult use to move forward from there once that's voted into. So, we at the Cannabis Legal Group are excited to help our clients. We're looking to meet with more people that are interested in getting into the industry. We're at the forefront of talking to various banks about changes that they want to make at a local level. And so we are hopefully going to be the forefront for your information. Continue to watch us here at Cannabis Live weekly. And for Craig Aronoff and
Barton Morris,
we're happy to see you. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Thank you.